Chapter 1, The Pulse at the Edge. The Void was never silent. Admiral Rourke had learned that long ago, back when humanity's fleets first pushed beyond the mapped corridors of the Orion Spur. Out here, sound was replaced by signals, coded bursts, encrypted chatter, the faint hum of alien machinery still echoing centuries after its makers had vanished. But this new pulse was different. It was deliberate. It was hungry. On the bridge of the Resolute, the surviving flagship, the crew sat rigid, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The rhythmic signal rolled through the comm arrays like a heartbeat, low and steady, impossible to jam. Origin? Rourke asked, his voice clipped, military comm masking the exhaustion etched into his features. Lieutenant Hale adjusted the sensor filters. Deep void, Admiral, beyond the wreckage field. It's not bouncing off debris, it's coming from something massive, something dormant until Vance's detonation. The mention of Vance drew silence. No one wanted to speak of the pilot who had rammed the Nexus node, sacrificing himself to prevent the Awakened from unleashing their weapon. Rourke forced the thought aside. Morning could wait, survival could not. Commander Ilias leaned forward, his tone sharp. We should withdraw. That pulse isn't a distress beacon, it's a lure. Alien empires have used similar resonance signals to bait scavenger fleets. We're exposed. Rourke's gaze hardened. Withdraw to where? The Awakened platforms are gone, but if that signal belongs to another empire, retreat only delays the inevitable. We need to know what's out there. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Humanity had survived by refusing to play by alien rules. Where the empires relied on arrogance and ritualized warfare, humans adapted, improvised, struck where least expected. That unpredictability had kept them alive, but it also meant they often walked straight into the jaws of things older and darker than any empire. Bring us closer, Rourke ordered. Slow burn. Keep shields angled toward the source. The Resolute's engines whispered to life, pushing the battered ship deeper into the void. The tactical display expanded, revealing the faint outline of a structure, colossal, jagged, half buried in shadow. It dwarfed the wreckage of the Nexus platforms, its silhouette stretching like the bones of a dead titan. Hale's voice dropped. That's not a ship, it's a Colossus. Alien architecture, scale beyond anything we've cataloged. Abandoned maybe, but the pulse is coming from inside. The bridge went still. Humanity had encountered derelicts before, hulks drifting from forgotten wars, stations left to rot, but this was different. This was deliberate placement at the void's edge, as if waiting for something to awaken it. Ilias broke the silence. Admiral, scavenger doctrine is clear. We don't enter alien colossi without full fleet support. One ship alone is suicide. Rourke's reply was cold steel. Doctrine doesn't apply when the alternative is ignorance. If this pulse is a weapon, we need to know before the empires do. If it's a signal, we need to know who it's calling. The crew stiffened. Orders were orders. The Colossus loomed larger as they approached, its surface scarred by ancient impacts, its geometry alien yet purposeful. Vast spires jutted outward, forming patterns that defied human logic. The pulse grew stronger, resonating through the hull, vibrating in the bones of every crew member. Reading internal cavities, Hale reported. Hollow sections large enough to house fleets. Energy traces minimal, but the pulse is amplifying. It's not broadcasting, it's feeding. Rourke's eyes narrowed. Feeding on what? Before Hale could answer, the comms officer cut in. Admiral, external channels are being probed, not by the empires. Something inside the Colossus is scanning us. It's invasive. Like it's tasting, the word hung heavy, tasting. Rourke stood, his presence commanding. Arm boarding teams were going in. Ilias snapped around. With respect, Admiral, that's reckless. We don't know what's inside. We don't know if Vance's detonation woke something that should have stayed buried. Rourke's voice was iron. We don't get to choose what wakes. We only choose how we face it. Assemble the teams. The order rippled through the ship. Marines strapped into exo-armor, weapons calibrated for close-quarters void combat. Engineers prepped drones for reconnaissance. The boarding craft were readied, their hulls reinforced against unknown atmospheric conditions. As the teams assembled, Hale whispered to Ilias, "You ever wonder why the empires fear us? It's not our weapons, it's that we walk into places they avoid." Ilias grimaced. "And sometimes we don't walk back." The boarding craft detached, gliding toward the Colossus's yawning breach. The pulse intensified, now a steady thrum that seemed to sync with human heartbeats. The breach swallowed them whole, darkness pressing in, sensors struggling to map the interior. Inside, the scale was overwhelming. Vast corridors stretched into shadow, walls etched with alien glyphs that pulsed faintly in rhythm with the signal. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the hum of human equipment. "Command, this is Alpha Team," came the voice of Captain Drex, leading the boarding party. "We've entered the primary chamber. Structure is stable. No hostiles detected." "But Admiral, the walls are alive. They're resonating with us." Rourke's reply was steady. "Proceed with caution, map everything, report anomalies immediately." Drex's voice carried a tension that words couldn't mask. "Acknowledged, but Admiral, it feels like we're being watched, not by machines, by something waiting." The pulse deepened, vibrating through the chamber as if responding to human presence. The glyphs bright and shifting patterns aligning into forms that resembled eyes. On the Resolute, alarms flared. Hale shouted, "Admiral, the Colossus is locking onto our ship. Energy readings spiking. It's not dormant, it's awakening." Rourke's jaw tightened. "Pull the boarding craft back now," but Drex's voice cut through, urgent and final. "Too late, the chamber's sealing. Admiral, it's feeding on us." The comms erupted in static as the pulse surged, drowning out human signals. The Colossus had awakened, and it was no longer silent. It was hungry. Rourke stared at the tactical display, the weight of command pressing down like the void itself. Humanity had survived arrogant empires by refusing to bow, but this was no empire. This was something older, something that didn't negotiate, didn't posture, didn't fear. It only hungered, and now it had found them. Chapter 2. The First Course. Master Chief Halen Voss flattened against the vibrating wall, his armor's sensors screaming contradictory data. The chamber seal had locked behind him, severing the boarding craft's tether. 4 meters ahead, Captain Drex was already a statue. Rigger locked his limbs, eyes wide and unblinking. Drex. Voss slapped the captain's helmet. Nothing. The man's vitals showed flatline neural activity, but his heart still pumped. He was gone, yet his body stood. Specialist Tark dropped to a knee, rifle tracking shadows that weren't there. "Chief, the walls are breathing. I can feel it through my boots." Voss could too. A slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction of the ship's interior matched exactly to the pulse that had murdered their comms. The glyphs on every surface now glowed a sickly amber, and the eyes, hundreds of them, open, not metaphors, actual eyes. They blinked in staggered sequence across the walls, each iris a swirling abyss of navy and violet. Voss watched one focus on him. It dilated. He did not return the gesture. "Nobody moves," he ordered. "No sudden gestures. No direct eye contact with the things on the walls." "What are they?" Private Lasky's voice cracked. "They're what's left of whoever found this place before us," Voss said. He gestured with his chin toward the nearest glow. Embedded in the membrane of the wall, half dissolved, was a skeleton still wearing a vacuum suit with markings no human database recognized. The flesh had been converted into that amber substance. The bones were being sucked dry. The Resolute would be pulling hard burn to break the Colossus's energy lock. That bought them minutes, maybe seconds. "Tark, give me a schematic of this chamber's structural load points. We're punching out." "Chief, the seal's 2 meters of," I said. "Do it." Tark's fingers flew across his wrist console, but the data came back nonsense. The Colossus wasn't built to human engineering standards. Rooms moved, corridors elongated and contracted. The very concept of a structural weak point didn't apply to something that could simply grow another bulkhead. A sound rippled through the chamber. Wet, low, it resonated in Voss's chest like a second heartbeat. The eyes on the walls turned in unison. They stared at Lasky. "Lasky, do not," the private screamed, not in fear, in pain. His armor crumpled inward as if an invisible fist was squeezing him from every direction. The servos whined, then snapped. Blood jetted from the seals. Voss tackled him sideways, firing his underbarrel shotgun into the wall where the eyes were most concentrated. The rounds embedded, did nothing. The eyes simply watched through the holes. "Feeding," Tark whispered. "It's feeding on him, on his life." Voss ripped Lasky's helmet off. The man's face was gray, eyes rolled back, capillaries burst across his cheeks in spiderweb patterns, alive but barely. The Colossus was not attacking, it was eating, and Voss realized this was not a warship, this was a trap, a lure. The alien empires that once ruled these stars didn't build this thing to fight battles. They built it to consume everything that got close, convert it into fuel, store it for some dark purpose. The hunger wasn't a metaphor, it was the ship's only function. Voss stood, planted his boots wide, and cycled his suit's outer speaker to full volume. "You want sustenance," he shouted at the walls. "I'll give you something better than meat." He unclipped a fusion charge from his belt, armed it, and slammed it into the membrane where Drex's corpse still stood frozen. "We're humans from a dead rock at the edge of nowhere. We survived empires that burned stars. You're just a mouth with no brain." The eyes blinked, the pulse trembled. The charge timer read 4 seconds. "Get behind me," Voss ordered. The explosion vaporized a 3-meter section of the chamber wall. The membrane screamed, a high-pitched, organic shriek that shook the bones in Voss's skull. Beyond the breach was not vacuum, it was throat. A tunnel of pulsing, ribbed tissue that led downward into absolute black. "Move," Voss barked, dragging Lasky. "Into the throat, we go deeper." Tark stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "We can't beat it from the outside," Voss said, "so we go inside, we find the thing that's hungry, and we cut it out." He stepped into the tunnel. The walls closed behind them. "We need to write chapter 3 of 12 for episode 20. The chapter should be 800 words, detailed, high-tension, military sci-fi. The context: Voss and Team Lasky, Tark, are inside the alien Colossus, which is a trap lure that consumes. They just blew a charge into a membrane and entered a throat-like tunnel. Now they need to go deeper to find the source of the hunger and cut it out. The writing rules, macro to micro scale, no clicky cutes, crisp dialogue pacing, output-only story text, will continue from that cliffhanger. Voss stepped into the tunnel, walls closed behind them. Now they are in complete darkness, moving through organic tunnel. Tension, the thing is aware they are inside, they need to find the core. We can introduce more alien horror, human resilience. Use short, punch-wise sentences, keep dialogue realistic, end with a new revelation or threat. The tunnel swallowed them in wet, absolute dark. Voss's helmet lamp cut a narrow cone through the air, thick, humid, with a metallic tang that coated his tongue. The walls pulsed around them, ribbed tissue contracting in slow peristalsis, pushing them forward. Contact, Lasky muttered, her voice thin. I'm stepping on something. Voss looked down. The floor was littered with fragments, bone shards, carbon-scored armor plates, the crushed remains of envirosuits from a dozen species. Some had been there for centuries. Others were still warm, the fabric edges frayed by digestive acids. This is the gullet, Tark said, his voice steady but tight. We're walking through its stomach. No, Voss corrected. We're walking through its intake. The digestion happens deeper. Ahead, the tunnel split into 3 passages, each lined with the same glistening tissue. The walls here were studded with crystalline nodes that glowed a faint, sickly amber. The light pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeat they'd felt earlier. Voss stopped and held up a fist. Hold. He knelt, scraped a sample from one of the bone fragments and fed it into his suit's analyzer. The display flickered. Organic residue, multiple species, some we don't have in the database. This thing's been feeding for a long time. So what's the plan? Tark asked. We wander until we find a nerve center. We find the source of the hunger signal, Voss said. The thing that's controlling this beast, it's not a ship, it's a biological weapon, a lure. The empires that built it didn't need to crew it, they just needed it to attract prey and process them. He tapped his helmet S-comms to a broader frequency, cycling through the ambient electromagnetic noise. The signal was faint, but there, a low-frequency hum that seemed to emanate from the central passage. That way, they moved in single file, Voss taking point. The tunnel narrowed until they had to crouch, then crawl. The walls were slick with a viscous fluid that seeped through the seams of their suits. Lasky's sensors ticked up, trace amounts of a neurotoxin, not lethal yet, but cumulative. We're being absorbed, she said, then we don't stay long. The passage opened into a chamber the size of a cargo bay. The ceiling was lost in shadow, but the floor was a shallow pool of translucent liquid, lit from below by bioluminescent veins. At the center of the pool, a massive organ pulsed, a sac of membrane and cartilage, like a heart the size of a dropship, suspended by tendrils from the unseen ceiling. And around it, anchored to the floor by chains of calcified tissue, were the remains of a dozen humanoid figures. They were still in their suits, datapads clutched in dead hands, helmets cracked open. The liquid had preserved them. Researchers, Tark breathed. They came here to study it. Voss approached the nearest. The suit's patch read, Dr. Alara Voss, Astrobiology Division, Unified Earth Fleet, his mother's name. He stared at the frozen face inside the helmet. The skin was bleached, the eyes open, the mouth locked in a silent scream. She had been dead for 30 years. The same 30 years the Colossus had drifted into the void, a ghost story that scavengers whispered about. She was part of the first expedition, Voss said, his voice flat. They came to make contact. The thing took them, processed them, stored their biomass, but she got this far. He pointed to the datapad clutched in her hand. The screen was cracked, but the data core was intact. Voss pried it loose, connected it to his suit's interface. The file was a log. The last entry, it's not a weapon, it's a nursery. The hunger is a signal calling for a parent. We are the food that will feed the hatchling. The sac pulsed. A deep, resonant thrum vibrated through the chamber. From the shadows beyond the pool, something moved. Not a limb, a shape. A silhouette too large to be human, too fluid to be mechanical. It stepped forward and the amber light caught its outline. A creature of fused metal and organic tissue, its body a lattice of stolen ship parts and alien bone. Its face was a smooth plate of obsidian, cracked in the center, and from the crack, a single-eye human blue wet stared at Voss. You are the child of the offering, it said, its voice a chorus of harmonics that scraped his skull. You will join her. Voss drew his sidearm, leveled it at the creature's eye. I'm here to cut you out. The creature tilted its head. The eye blinked slowly. You cannot cut hunger, you can only feed it. The sac pulsed again, and the liquid in the pool began to rise. The creature did not flinch at the pistol. It took another step, the fused metal of its chassis groaning with the movement. Voss held his ground, his finger resting on the trigger guard, not the trigger. A dead man's squeeze was for amateurs. You're a hybrid, he said. The first expedition, they didn't die, they were assimilated. The blue eye in the obsidian plate contracted. Assimilation implies a will to merge. We are not a collective. We are a single organism, the parent. Voss's tactical overlay flickered. He patched into the creature's thermal signature. It ran cold, room temperature. No heat plume, no energy waste. It was perfectly efficient. That meant it wasn't running on combustion or fusion. It was running on something else, biomass conversion. The nursery, Voss said, nodding toward the sack. You're the parent, the sack is the egg, the signal is the call for a mate. The creature stepped closer. The pool of amber liquid lapped at its feet but did not cling to the metal. The signal is a cry. We were abandoned here. The builders fled the void. They left us to starve. So you eat scavengers. We eat anything that reaches the core. You are the first to bring a weapon. Voss smiled. It was not a warm expression. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to understand you. The creature stopped. The eye blinked again, slower this time. You lied. Your heart rate is elevated. Your cortisol levels are spiking. You are afraid. Fear is a tool, Voss said. It keeps me alive. He lowered the pistol but did not holster it. Instead, he reached into his utility pouch and pulled out a small, cylindrical device. A seismic charge, compact but powerful enough to collapse 100 meters of tunnel. This is a negotiation tool, he said. If I detonate it, the entire chamber collapses. The Colossus loses structural integrity. The void pressure crushes everything. You, me, the egg, all of it. The creature's head tilted the other way. A sound escaped it, a dry, clicking rasp. Laughter. You would die. I'm already dead, Voss said. I've been dead for 30 years. The difference is I get to choose how I go. The creature's chassis hummed. The ambient light in the chamber dimmed, then brightened. The sack pulsed in rhythm with the hum, a feedback loop. The creature was communicating with the egg. You are not like the others, it said. I'm not. I'm the one who survived. Voss took a step forward. The amber liquid was up to his shins now. It was warm, too warm. He could feel it through the suit's insulation. The log said the hunger is a signal, a call for a parent, but you're already here. You're the parent, so what are you calling for? The creature was silent for a long moment. The blue eye drifted, unfocused, as if looking at something far away. We are calling for a home, it said. The void is cold. The Colossus is dying. We cannot reproduce without a host world. The egg requires a biosphere to incubate. We have been adrift for millennia. You're not a weapon, you're a refugee. We are both. Voss considered that. The seismic charge was still in his hand. He could end it here. Collapse the Colossus, bury the egg, let the void take the rest. But that wouldn't solve the problem. There were other colossi, other signals, other scavengers. I can take you to a world, he said. The creature's chassis vibrated. A low, resonant thrum. You would feed us. I would negotiate. You stop eating my people. I give you a planet, uninhabited. You incubate your egg. You leave us alone, and if we refuse, Voss held up the seismic charge, then I end it. Right now you get nothing. The creature's blue eye fixed on him. The obsidian plate cracked further, a hairline fracture spreading from the eye socket. You are a dangerous animal, it said. I'm a human, Voss replied. We specialize in dangerous. The creature extended a hand. The fingers were a lattice of bone and steel tipped with razor-sharp claws. We accept your terms. Voss did not shake the hand. He placed the seismic charge back in his pouch. Good, then we have a deal. He turned and walked back toward the tunnel. The amber liquid receded as he moved, retreating into the pool as if it had a will of its own. Behind him, the creature spoke. You will not survive the journey. Voss didn't stop walking. I've survived worse. Chapter 5. The bargain in ashes. The tunnels of the Colossus stretched like arteries carved into stone, each echo carrying the weight of civilizations long dead. Voss's boots struck the metal floor with deliberate rhythm, his squad trailing behind in silence. The seismic charge weighed heavy in his pouch, a reminder of the razor-thin line between negotiation and annihilation. Captain, Sergeant Hale's voice cut through the comms, low and precise. You sure about this? We're walking out of here with a deal instead of a kill. Voss didn't slow. We're walking out alive, that's the difference. Behind them, the amber liquid had vanished into the recesses of the chamber, leaving only the faint hum of alien machinery. The creature's words still lingered in Voss's mind. You will not survive the journey. It wasn't a threat, it was a prediction. The squad reached a junction where the walls opened into a cavernous hall. Alien glyphs pulsed faintly across the surfaces, their light dim and uneven like a dying heartbeat. Lieutenant Aaron raised his rifle, scanning the shadows. Place looks like it's waiting for something. It is, Voss said. An egg doesn't hatch without a world. They've been waiting millennia. We're the first ones dumb enough to walk in and talk instead of shoot. Hale spat into the dust. Humans don't wait millennia. We take what we need when we need it. That's why we win. Voss stopped at the center of the hall. That's why we survive. Winning's optional. The squad spread out, securing the perimeter. Above them, the ceiling arched into darkness, ribbed with skeletal supports that looked disturbingly organic. The silence pressed in, broken only by the faint crackle of comms. Then the walls shifted, not visibly but perceptibly, like the Colossus itself had inhaled. A vibration rolled through the floor, subtle yet undeniable. Movement, Aaron muttered. Multiple signatures, closing. Shapes emerged from the far end of the hall, not soldiers, not machines, something in between. Tall constructs of bone and alloy, their limbs jointed at unnatural angles, eyes glowing with cold blue fire. They moved without sound, without hesitation, forming a semicircle around the humans. Hale raised his rifle, targets acquired. Hold, Voss ordered. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of tone that made men obey even when their instincts screamed otherwise. The largest construct stepped forward. Its voice was a grinding resonance, like stone dragged across steel. You spoke of a world, a place for the egg. Voss met its gaze. Uninhabited, rich biosphere, you get your incubation, we get distance. The construct tilted its head. You presume authority over worlds. I presume survival, Voss replied. That's all authority ever is. The construct's claws flexed, scraping against its own armor. And if your empire refuses, Voss pulled the seismic charge from his pouch, holding it up for all to see. Then this hall becomes a tomb. For you, for your egg, for every scrap of your history, I don't bluff. The semicircle tightened, claws glinting. Hale's finger hovered near the trigger. Aaron's jaw clenched. The construct raised a hand. The others froze. Silence fell again, heavier than before. You are dangerous, it said. Voss nodded once. That's the deal. Dangerous buys leverage. Leverage buys survival. The construct lowered its hand. We accept, but know this, your species is not unique. Others have bargained. Others have failed. Then we'll be the first to succeed, Voss said. He clipped the seismic charge back to his belt. Because we don't bargain for glory, we bargain for tomorrow. The constructs retreated, vanishing into the shadows as silently as they had appeared. The hall dimmed, the glyphs fading to near black. Hale exhaled sharply. Captain, you just promised them a planet. You planning to deliver? Voss started walking again toward the exit tunnels. I promised them a chance. Whether they get it depends on how much they keep their claws off us. Aaron fell in beside him. And if they do, Voss's hand brushed the seismic charge. Then we finish what we started. The squad moved through the tunnels, the oppressive silence following them like a shadow. Outside, beyond the Colossus, the void stretched infinite and merciless. Somewhere out there lay unclaimed worlds, untouched biospheres, places where an alien egg could hatch without human blood spilled. But Voss knew the truth. Deals with predators were never permanent. They were pauses, not endings. As the squad reached the docking bay, the human frigate loomed in the gloom, its hull scarred but intact. The sight was a relief, a reminder that steel and firepower were still theirs to command. Hale muttered, never thought I'd see the day we cut a deal with something that eats people. Voss climbed the ramp, his boots ringing against the metal. Get used to it. Out here, survival isn't about who you kill. It's about who you can live with long enough to fight the next war. The frigate's engines rumbled to life, shaking the bay. As the ship lifted, the Colossus receded into darkness, its vast form swallowed by the void. Voss stood at the viewport, watching until the alien structure was nothing more than a shadow among stars. His reflection stared back at him, hard eyes, scarred face, a man who had just bargained with monsters. He whispered to himself, barely audible over the hum of the ship. We specialize in dangerous, and the void, silent and endless, seemed to whisper back. Chapter 6, the silent hunger. The frigate's hull trembled as it broke free from the Colossus's docking bay, engines burning against the void. Inside, the squad moved with the precision of soldiers who had survived too many wars to trust silence. Voss stood at the command dais, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The alien structure behind them was fading into shadow, but its presence lingered like a wound in the stars. Status, Voss's voice was clipped steady. Hale checked the console. Engines stable, shields holding, but we're not alone. He tapped the screen, magnifying a cluster of signals. 2 cruisers, not ours, alien signatures, Empire class. The crew stiffened. The Empire had been arrogant enough to claim dominion over half the sector, but their fleets had been bleeding against human resistance for years. Now, here at the Void's edge, they were hunting. Range, Voss asked, closing fast. They've got the tonnage advantage. If they lock us, we're boxed. Hale's tone was grim. Leaned forward, studying the display. The cruisers were sleek, predatory shapes, bristling with weapons. Human frigates weren't built for stand-up fights against ships like that, but humans weren't built to bow either. Options, Voss demanded. Lieutenant Rhin spoke from the gunnery station. We can run, burn hard, hope they don't chase, or we fight, but if we fight, we blade. Voss's jaw tightened. Running only delays the inevitable. They'll track us, corner us later. We fight now on our terms. The squad exchanged glances. No one argued. Humans had learned long ago that hesitation killed faster than enemy fire. Arm weapons, Voss ordered. Target their lead cruiser. Make them doubt their superiority. The frigate's cannons powered up, humming with lethal energy. The void outside seemed to pulse, as if aware of the coming clash. Hale muttered under his breath, 2 cruisers against 1 frigate. Odds are garbage. Voss's reply was cold steel. Odds don't matter, execution does. The alien cruisers broke formation, moving with predatory grace. Their weapons lit the dark, streaks of plasma cutting across the void. The frigate rolled hard, shields flaring as the first salvo struck. Metal screamed, but the hull held. Return fire, Rhin barked. The frigate's cannons spat fury, slamming into the lead cruiser's flank. Explosions rippled across its hull, fragments scattering into the void. The alien ship staggered, its arrogance dented. They're regrouping, Hale warned. Second cruiser moving to flank. Voss's mind raced. The Colossus loomed faintly behind them, a silent giant. He He remembered the darkness they had bargained with inside its halls, the hungering presence that had watched them without eyes. Deals with predators were pauses, not endings. Perhaps that truth could be weaponized. Bring us about, Voss ordered. Toward the Colossus, the crew hesitated. Sir, that thing, Hale began. Do it, Voss snapped. The Empire thinks they own fear. Let's show them what real fear looks like. The frigate swung in a brutal arc, engines roaring as it dove back toward the alien structure. The cruisers pursued, confident in their superiority. But as the frigate neared the Colossus, the void seemed to thicken, shadows stretching unnaturally. The hungering silence stirred, sensors screamed, Hale's eyes widened. Something waking inside the Colossus, energy spikes massive. The alien cruisers slowed, uncertainty flickering in their movements. They had fought humans, crushed colonies, burned worlds, but the Colossus was older than their empire, older than their arrogance, and it was not dead. Hold position, Voss ordered. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Let them come closer. The cruisers advanced, weapons primed, then the darkness moved. A vast shape unfolded from the Colossus, not mechanical, not alive, but something in between. It stretched across the void, silent, hungering. Its presence pressed against the frigate's hull, against the crew's minds, a suffocating weight. The alien cruisers faltered, their weapons dimmed, their signals fractured. One cruiser fired wildly, plasma bolts vanishing into the void as if swallowed. The other tried to retreat, engines flaring in panic. Voss watched, unblinking. Predators don't negotiate. They consume. The Colossus's shadow reached out, enveloping the retreating cruiser. Metal twisted, hulls crumpled, screams cut short. The ship vanished into silence. The second cruiser turned, desperate to flee, but the shadow followed, inevitable. Within moments, both ships were gone, devoured without sound, without mercy. The frigate trembled, sensors flickering. Hale whispered, "What the hell did we just unleash?" Voss's gaze was hard. Not unleashed, revealed. The Empire thought they were hunters. Now they know their prey. The crew sat in stunned silence, the void pressing in. The Colossus loomed, its hunger sated for now. Voss turned from the viewport, his voice steady. "Plot a course away from here, fast, before it remembers us." Engines roared, pulling the frigate from the shadow's reach. The Colossus receded once more, a silent titan at the void's edge, but its presence lingered in the crew's minds, a reminder that survival was not about victory. It was about enduring the darkness long enough to fight the next war. Voss stood alone at the command dais, his reflection staring back from the viewport. Scarred face, hard eyes, a man who had bargained with monsters and lived. He whispered, "We specialize in dangerous." This time the void did not whisper back, it only watched, silent and hungering. The frigate's hull groaned as it cleared the Colossus's outer gravity well, red alert lights stuttering as power rerouted from weapons to engines. Ahead, the half-million-kilometer derelict receded into the void, its central maw still gaping, the two Imperial cruisers gone without a trace, no debris, no distress signal, just empty space where they'd been 30 seconds prior. On the bridge, the silence was thick enough to taste, sharp with the smell of burnt wiring and cold sweat. Rios, the sensor officer, was the first to break it, her voice tight enough to snap. Multiple FTL signatures, 12 light minutes out, bearing 270. Imperial 7th Flotilla, full hunter-killer complement. IFF matches their patrol group. Hails are going unanswered. Hale's knuckles bleached white where he gripped the pilot's yoke. How long until they're in weapons range? 8 minutes. Lead cruiser is charging a Mark IV frigate buster torpedo. Point defense batteries are already hot. They're not here to investigate the cruiser disappearances. They're here to glass us. Voss stepped forward from the command dais, his face calm, no trace of the shock etched into every other crew member's expression. They think we lured those cruisers into the Colossus. They think we have control of it. Arrogant bastards can't wrap their heads around the idea that a derelict is smarter than they are. Rios blinked, her screen flickering as a new signal popped up. Colossus just pinged the flotilla. Low-frequency, encrypted Imperial military band. It's not random, it's targeting them specifically. "You're saying that Rock has a grudge," Hale snorted. Voss's jaw tightened, a faint scar across his cheek catching the strobing red light. "It does." The 7th Flotilla's predecessor unit breached its core 72 years ago, tried to siphon its power to fuel a jump gate. I was there, junior officer on the destroyer that led the boarding party, watched 3,000 of my squad mates get eaten. I ejected, survived. Deserted a week later. Rios pulled up the 12-digit tactical access code Voss had handed her an hour prior, the one he'd sworn he'd never use again. "You want to send this to the Colossus. It'll mark us as non-hostile. Those Imperials are going to fire that torpedo in 3 minutes. If it hits the Colossus's outer hull, it'll wake the whole thing up, and it'll eat every ship in the sector, including us. We need to lead the lead cruiser into its shadow range before they fire." "That's a death run," Hale said, his voice flat. "Their point defense will shred us before we get close. The Colossus will take them out first. Drop the stealth field, send the code, then dive hard for their lead ship. Full burn, no evasive maneuvers. They'll be too busy targeting the Colossus to notice us until it's too late. Rio sent the burst. A second later, a low thrum vibrated through the frigate's hull, so deep it made the crew's teeth ache. Ahead, the Colossus's central maw flared bright violet, a targeting laser locking onto the lead Imperial cruiser 4 light minutes out. The cruiser fired the torpedo, but the Colossus's shadow shot out faster, enveloping the warhead first, then the entire 400-meter cruiser, crumpling its hull like wet paper, dragging it into the maw without a sound. The rest of the flotilla panicked, spraying mass driver rounds and plasma bolts into the shadow, but each salvo only made the shadow reach further, eating 3 more cruisers in 10 seconds. The remaining Imperials broke formation, trying to trigger FTL jumps, but their drives sputtered, disabled by the Colossus's interference field. Hale stared wide-eyed as the Colossus finished off the last destroyer, then retracted its shadow back into its maw, the violet flare fading to black. Holy shit. Voss leaned against the dais, his face tight with the memory of 72 years prior. Plot a course for the scavenger outpost at Titan's Belt, full burn. We just made ourselves the most wanted traitors in the Empire, and that thing out there is going to hunt every Imperial ship that comes within a light year of it for the next century. The frigate's engines roared, pushing it away from the silent Titan at the void's edge. Voss looked at his reflection in the viewport, the scar across his jaw catching the fading red alert light. For 72 years, he'd run from the Empire, from the memory of the men he'd failed to save. Now, for the first time, he wasn't running. He was leading. The void didn't whisper back. But as the Colossus faded from view, Voss could have sworn the shadow lingering at its maw twitched like a nod. The Titan's Belt outpost was a rusted hub of scavenger ships welded together, a floating boneyard of salvage and desperation. Voss docked the frigate with a hard clang, the airlock hissing open to reveal a corridor lit by flickering neon strips. The stench of ozone, stale ration paste, and unwashed bodies hit them first. Hale stepped out, rifle low, scanning the shadows. Friendly welcome, tolerated at best, Voss said, his boots echoing on grated metal. We bring news of the Colossus. That's currency here. A grizzled woman with a cybernetic eye and a plasma cutter strapped to her thigh emerged from a side passage. Voss, heard you were dead. Close enough, Kara. Voss didn't slow. Need a secure comm line, untraceable. Kara fell into step beside him, her eye whirring as it focused on Hale. New blood, Empire's got a bounty on your head now, triple digits. They'll quadruple it by dawn. Voss stopped at a hatch marked COMMS Keep Out. He punched in a code from memory, the lock clicking open. We found the source of the void's whisper. Kara's face went pale. The thing that ate the obsidian, the one the Imperials sent 12 ships to silence. It's not a thing, Hale said, stepping past her. It's a weapon. And it's hungry. Inside the comms room, Voss patched into a scrambled frequency, the screen flickering before resolving into a woman's face, sharp cheekbones, gray hair cropped short, eyes that had seen too much. Admiral Torrin, you're alive. Barely. Torrin's voice was gravel. The Empire declared me a traitor after I refused to bomb a civilian colony. Been hiding in the outer drift for 6 years. What do you have? Voss laid it out, the Colossus, the shadow, the way it ate the flotilla like a child popping bubbles. It's not dormant, it's waiting, and it recognized me. Torrin's image froze for a second, then she leaned forward. Recognized you? How? I was here 72 years ago. When the first wave went in, I saw the shadow then, felt it brush my mind. It knows me. Voss's jaw tightened. It wants something, not just ships, it wants us. Hale cut in. We need to warn every outpost, every scavenger, every rogue cell. The Empire will send more, they'll throw everything at it, and it'll eat them all. Torrin nodded slowly. I have contacts in the Resistance. We can broadcast a warning, but it'll take time. The Empire's jamming everything outside the belt. Time we don't have. Voss turned to the door. Get the word out, we're going back. Back. Hale grabbed his arm. You just watched it eat a cruiser. What the hell are we supposed to do against that? Learn. Voss pulled free. That thing is older than the Empire, older than any human record. If it has a weakness, it's in the Colossus itself. We need to go inside. Kara laughed, a dry, brittle sound. Inside? No one's gone inside and come back. The first expedition, the one you survived, Voss, they had full suits, heavy weapons, 100 men. You had a malfunctioning beacon and a prayer. I also had a fragment of its hull. Voss reached into his jacket, pulling out a shard of black metal, no larger than his palm. It pulsed with a faint violet light, the same hue as the maw. It's been in my pocket for 72 years. It never stops humming. Hale stared at the shard, a cold dread settling in his gut. You carried that thing with you through every jump, every checkpoint. It's the only reason I'm still alive. Voss's eyes were hollow. The Empire wanted it. They killed my crew for it. I ran because I knew what it was, a key, and now I know what lock it fits. The shard pulsed brighter and the lights in the room flickered. Kara's cybernetic eye word, reading a spike in exotic radiation. That's not a key, Voss. That's a beacon. Voss looked at the shard, then at the viewport where the Colossus lay in the void, waiting. Then let it call me home. The silence in the room was broken by a low, resonant hum from the shard, a whisper that wasn't sound but feeling. It said one word, clear as a bell in Voss's mind, come. Chapter 9, the maw opens. The shard's hum deepened, vibrating through the deck plating. Voss held it steady, his hand unwavering despite the tremor in the air. Kara's cybernetic eye flickered, recalibrating against the radiation spike. Hale's jaw tightened. He had seen men break under less pressure, but Voss looked like he had already surrendered to something older than war. Command won't sanction this, Hale said, voice clipped. We're already on the edge of mutiny. Drag us inside that thing, we're not coming back. Voss didn't look at him. His gaze was locked on the viewport, where the alien Colossus hung in the void like a corpse suspended in black water. Its surface was jagged, scarred by millennia, yet it pulsed faintly with violet veins that matched the shard. They'll sanction survival, Voss replied. The Empire thinks it owns the void, they think their fleets are eternal. But this, he lifted the shard, its glow intensifying, this is older than their arrogance. And it's waiting for us. Kara's laugh was short, bitter. You sound like a priest, you want us to kneel before it. No, Voss said. I want us to learn how to kill it. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the low hum of the shard. Hale finally spoke, his tone sharp, military, precise. Fine, we breach, but we do it my way. No wandering, no heroics. We map, we move, we extract. If it's a trap, we burn the path behind us. Kara adjusted her rifle, the metallic click echoing. And if it's not a trap, then we find out what it's hiding, Hale said. The dropship detached from the frigate with a shudder. As they approached the Colossus, its scale became monstrous. Towers of alien alloy rose like broken teeth, each one large enough to dwarf a battleship. The surface was not dead, it shifted faintly as though breathing. Radiation spiked, Kara reported. Exotic particles, nothing in the Empire's catalog matches. Keep it contained, Hale ordered. No leaks into the cabin. The dropship's clamps locked against a jagged ridge. The hull groaned as the airlock extended, sealing against the alien's surface. The door hissed open, revealing a corridor of black metal that seemed to drink the light. Helmet seals, Hale barked. Weapons hot. They stepped inside. The corridor stretched endlessly, walls etched with patterns that writhed when stared at too long. The shard in Voss's hand pulsed brighter, guiding them deeper. This place isn't built for us, Kara muttered. It's built to confuse. Stay sharp, Hale said, eyes forward. They moved in formation, boots echoing against the alien alloy. The air was thick, not with dust, but with something heavier, like pressure, like thought. Every step felt observed. Then the hum changed. The shard's glow flared and the walls responded, veins of violet light spreading outward. The corridor shifted, opening into a vast chamber. It was a cathedral of machinery. Pillars rose into darkness, each one humming with power. At the center stood a structure like a throne, carved from the same black alloy, its surface alive with shifting glyphs. Voss stepped forward, his voice low. This is the lock. Kara raised her rifle. And what's the key? Voss lifted the shard. The throne responded, glyphs rearranging, light intensifying. The hum became a roar, vibrating through their bones. Hale's voice cut through the noise. Voss, stop, you don't know what you're waking. I know exactly what I'm waking, Voss said. His eyes were hollow, but his voice was steady. The Empire killed my crew for this. They thought it was a weapon. They were wrong. It's a hunger. And it's been waiting. The throne's surface split open, revealing a void within, a darkness deeper than the void outside. It wasn't absence, it was presence. A silent, hungering awareness that pressed against their minds. Kara staggered, clutching her head. It's inside. Hale grabbed her shoulder, steadying her. Hold the line. The darkness pulsed and the chamber shook. Machinery groaned, ancient systems awakening. The shard dissolved in Voss's hand, its light merging with the throne. Voss turned to them, his face pale, his voice calm. It knows us now. It knows humanity. Hale raised his rifle, aiming at the throne. Then we kill it before it learns too much. The chamber erupted. Violet light surged, forming shapes, figures, echoes of alien soldiers long dead. They moved with precision, weapons formed from the same black alloy. Contact, Hale shouted. Form up. Kara fired, her rifle's rounds sparking against the constructs. They staggered but did not fall. Hale switched to armor-piercing, his shots tearing through one figure, dispersing it into smoke. Not flesh, Kara snarled. They're projections. Projections can still kill, Hale snapped. The constructs advanced, their movements relentless. The chamber became a battlefield, echoes of war fought in silence. Every shot, every strike echoed against the walls, feeding the hum. Voss stood at the throne, untouched, his eyes locked on the void within. It's testing us, he said softly. It wants to know if we're worthy. Worthy of what? Hale demanded, firing another burst. Voss's voice was almost reverent, of being consumed. The chamber shook harder, the throne's void expanding. The constructs multiplied, their numbers overwhelming. Kara's rifle overheated, smoke rising from its barrel. Hale's armor registered critical damage. We're not holding this line, Kara shouted, Hale's jaw clenched. Then we fall back. Voss, move. But Voss didn't move. He placed his hand on the throne, and the void surged, swallowing the constructs in an instant. Silence fell, broken only by the hum. Voss turned, his eyes glowing faint violet. It knows me. It chose me. Hale raised his rifle, finger tightening on the trigger. Step away, Voss. Voss smiled, a hollow, broken smile. You can't kill what's already claimed. The chamber's walls pulsed, the glyphs rearranging into a single word etched in light, come. The hum deepened and the throne's void expanded, reaching for them. Hale's voice was sharp, commanding, unyielding. Fall back now. They ran, the corridor collapsing behind them, the Colossus awakening. And in the silence between heartbeats, the darkness whispered again, not just to Voss, but to all of them, come. The roar of collapsing durasteel swallowed Hale's order to fall back, dust thick enough to choke coating his visor. He slammed a fist against his helmet's purge seal, clearing the grit just in time to see a 2-ton slab of ceiling skewer the space where Kara had been standing a second before. She hit the deck rolling, her mag rifle spitting blue tracer rounds into the breach where 3 of the Colossus's construct drones were forcing their way through the buckled wall, their faceless void alloy heads turning to track the muzzle flash. Rin, exit seals. Hale barked, grabbing Kara's harness and yanking her behind a fallen support beam as a construct's energy blast scorched the stone where she'd been crouched. The squad's tech specialist was already hammering at his wrist-mounted datapad, his face pale under the violet glow of the chamber's pulsing glyphs. Blown, all 3 access points to the docking bay are locked down by the Colossus's security protocol. Drain fields already pulling at our ship's power core, hull integrity S at 62% and dropping fast. The hum that had been thrumming in their teeth since they'd breached the throne room spiked, sharp enough to make Hale's vision swim. The whispers were louder now, not just a distant susurrus, but a voice curled tight around the inside of his skull, repeating the same single word, come. A silhouette stepped out of a side alcove 20 meters down the corridor, and Hale's rifle snapped up before he could think. Voss, his eyes glowed the same soft violet as the glyphs on the wall, his uniform torn at the collar where the void had brushed him when he'd touched the throne. He didn't flinch at the weapon trained on his chest, his smile hollow, the same broken one he'd worn right before the throne's void had swallowed the first wave of constructs. Stand down, Hale, Voss said, his voice steady, no trace of the reverence he'd had when he'd talked about being consumed. The constructs won't attack me. Not while the entity's mark is on me. You're compromised, Hale said, his finger tight on the trigger. Step away from the corridor. You don't have a choice. Voss jerked his chin toward the far end of the hall where the docking bay access was already bucking under the force of the Colossus' shifting bulk. Your ship's hull will be shredded in 90 seconds. If you want to get out, you need to destroy the core nexus in the throne room. Kara's head snapped up. The corridor back is collapsed. Voss lifted his hand, and the durasteel rubble blocking the path glowed violet, melting like wax under a torch. The air reeked of ozone and something deeper, older, like the smell of a star going out. I can open a path, but I have to stay behind to hold the constructs off. The entity won't let you near the core unopposed. Hale's jaw tightened. He'd pulled Voss into the scavenger crew 3 cycles back after finding him drifting in a derelict Kyraxian shuttle, half dead, with no memory of how he'd gotten there. He'd never expected the quiet, unassuming mechanic to be a pawn for whatever ancient horror the arrogant Kyraxian hegemony had buried in this Colossus, the weapon they'd abandoned when they couldn't control its hunger for dark matter. Rin, you and Kara take the demo charges, Hale said, not taking his eyes off Voss. Plant them on the core's housing, blow it from the inside. What about you? Kara asked, already slinging her rifle to grab the satchel of charges from Rin's pack. I'll hold this line with Voss, make sure nothing gets past you. Voss nodded, stepping past Hale toward the head of the collapsed corridor. As he walked, the constructs that had been pouring through the wall breaches froze, their void alloy limbs locking mid-step. The whispers in Hale's head faded for half a second, then came back sharper, angrier, like the entity had just realized it was being outmaneuvered. Hurry, Voss said, placing his palm on the melted durasteel. The void swelled around his arm, the skin blackening where it touched, but he didn't flinch. It's already diverting power to the docking bay seals. Your ship's thrusters are going to be disabled before you can board. Kara and Rin took off running down the newly opened path, their boots clanging on the still-warm melted metal. Hale took cover behind the support beam, racking the charge in his mag rifle, watching as the first construct broke free of the entity's hold, charging down the corridor toward him. The first shot echoed, loud enough to make his ears ring, the construct's head exploding in a shower of void alloy shards. Behind him, Voss laughed, soft and broken, as the rest of the drone surged forward, the Colossus's hum rising to a scream as it continued its slow, inexorable break out of the asteroid's crust, heading for the open void beyond. We need to write Chapter 11 of 12 for Episode 20. The story context given ends with Hale shooting a construct, Vios laughing, and the Colossus breaking free. We need to continue from there. The chapter should be 800-100 words, detailed, high-stakes, military sci-fi. Focus on the grand clash, no CL icky acutes, crisp dialogue. The previous chapter ended mid-action. We'll pick up with Kara and Arin heading to plant charges, Hale and Vias holding the line. Need to advance plot, they must destroy the core, but the entity is fighting back. Also consider the ship being disabled. We'll write from multiple perspectives, but primarily Hale, keep tension high. The construct's headless frame crumpled, but two more took its place, their limbs jerking as the entity reasserted control. Hale fired again, the maground punching through a chest plate, sending it spinning into the wall. The third kept coming, faster, its clawed hands swiping at his cover. He ducked, rolled, and came up with the rifle braced against his hip, stitching a line of rounds across its torso until it collapsed. They're adapting, Voss said, his voice strained. The black corrosion had crawled past his elbow, tendrils of void stuff threading into the melted durasteel like roots. It's learning how to counter my influence. I can feel it peeling back my defenses. Then stop playing with it and buy us time, Hale snapped, reloading. How long until Kara and Rin reach the core? Voss's eyes flickered, unfocused, as if listening to something far away. The path is clear, but the entity is sealing bulkheads ahead of them. They'll have to cut through 3 more doors before they reach the housing chamber. I'm redirecting power from the secondary conduits to keep the path open, but it's burning me out. Hale risked a glance down the corridor. The melted passage stretched into darkness, lit only by the occasional pulse of red emergency lighting. No sound of gunfire or cutting torches yet. They were still running. A low groan vibrated through the deck plates. The entire Colossus shuddered, and a crack split the ceiling above them, raining dust and chunks of composite. Through the breach, Hale could see the void outside, black, starless, the edge of the system's gravity well. The Colossus was moving. Not just breaking free of the asteroid, it was orienting itself, turning its immense bulk toward the distant glow of the human fleet's staging area. It's going to fire the main weapon, Voss said, his voice barely a whisper. It doesn't need the core to do that. The primary capacitor banks are charged from the void itself. It's been building that charge for centuries. Then we stop it before it fires, Hale said. He keyed his comm. Kara, status, a burst of static, then her voice, breathless. At the second bulkhead, Rin's cutting now. The entity is flooding the chamber with atmosphere, some kind of corrosive gas. We're running low on filter packs. Push through. Once you're at the core, set the charges on the housing, not the core itself. The housing is the control interface. Destroy that and the entity loses its connection to the Colossus. Copy, out. Hale turned back to Voss. The man was on his knees now, both hands pressed against the floor, his skin a lattice of black veins. The constructs had stopped advancing, but they stood motionless in a semicircle, their empty eye sockets fixed on Voss as if waiting for a command. It's offering me a deal, Voss said, his lips barely moving. It wants to integrate me, says I can be its new host, a better vessel than the one it's been using. Don't listen to it, Hale said, stepping closer. That's how it gets you, it talks, it promises, and then it eats you from the inside. Voss laughed again, that same broken sound. I know, I've been hearing its voice since I was a child. Every time I touched the void, it whispered, but I never answered, not until today. He looked up, his eyes black, the pupils gone. I'm going to let it in, just enough to overload the connection. When I do, the constructs will freeze for 30 seconds, maybe a minute. That's your window to get to the docking bay and launch. You'll die. I was dead the moment I stepped into this place. Voss's face twisted into something that might have been a smile. At least this way I take a piece of it with me. Hale wanted to argue, but there was no time. The Colossus hummed louder, a deep resonant thrum that vibrated in his bones. The weapon was charging. He could feel it, a pressure building in the air, in the void itself. Do it, Hale said. Voss closed his eyes. The black veins spread across his face, up his neck, into his hair. His body arched, a silent scream frozen on his lips, and then the constructs collapsed, their limbs going slack, clattering to the deck like discarded puppets. The hum stopped. Silence, absolute and crushing. Hale ran. He sprinted down the corridor, past the fallen constructs, past the melted bulkheads, toward the docking bay. Behind him, he heard Voss's voice, not speaking but resonating in his skull, a final whisper. Run. The Colossus was still, for now. The silence shattered before the first construct moved. A high, thin whine spiked from the Colossus's core relays, the first sign Voss's overload was fraying. Hale's mag boots skidded on the scored durasteel deck, the taste of ozone and burnt coolant sharp in his mouth, ribs throbbing where a construct had thrown him into a bulkhead 10 minutes prior. 200 meters to the docking bay. The count in his head was already running. The first construct twitched, its plasma cutter arm sparked to life, the limb jerking as its neural link rebooted. It lunged before Hale could raise his pulse carbine. He slid under its swing, the searing heat of the cutter singing the edge of his armor, and put a burst through its sensor cluster. The construct crumpled, limbs going slack, but 3 more were already pushing themselves upright behind it, their movements snappier now, coordinated. 30 seconds, Voss, he muttered, hip-firing as he ran. 2 shots, 2 sensor clusters blown. The third construct swiped at his pack, tearing a gash in the fabric where the void core stabilizer was tucked, the only device that could shield New Avalon from the Kyra hegemony's planned planetary glassing. He didn't break stride. The whine in the air grew louder, a pressure building behind his eyes, the Colossus's weapon systems coming back online. The deck vibrated under his boots, that deep, resonant thrum he'd felt when the weapon first started charging. An automated turret dropped from the ceiling 20 meters from the bay door, its twin pulse cannons swiveling to lock on. Hale dove behind a stack of discarded alien cargo crates, pulse bolts cracking the plastic of his shoulder plating. He peeked out, spotted the turret's exposed power coupling behind its barrel mount, and took a single shot. Sparks showered, the turret sputtered and died, 50 meters. The constructs were closing in, their mechanical footsteps clattering on the deck. He could hear their servos whining, the low static of their targeting systems locking onto his heat signature. He pushed off the crate, sprinting the last stretch, his breath ragged in his helmet. The docking bay door hissed open at his approach, the seal he'd rigged before splitting up from Voss holding. He skidded inside, slammed his hand on the rust bucket's launch override, and threw himself into the pilot's seat as the ship's engines roared to life. The hull vibrated as the salvage ship pulled away from the Colossus's docking clamp. Hale twisted in his seat, looking back through the rear viewport. The entire structure was lit up now, that sickly, luminescent purple of void energy crawling over its hull. A beam of raw void energy lanced out from its central weapon mount, missing their stern by less than 100 meters, and then the core section imploded. The Colossus folded in on itself, dragged into the void it had been anchored to, gone in 3 seconds flat. He keyed his comm, hailing the rest of the crew at the rendezvous point. 3 systems over. This is Hale, mission complete. Voss is gone. We have the stabilizer, the invasion timetables, all the hegemony fleet positions pulled from the core before the overload hit. Static crackled, then Jax's voice came through, rough with relief. Copy that. Jump coordinates are locked. We'll be there in 10. Hale tapped the data pad on his console, uploading the files to Human Fleet Command. The Kyra hegemony had spent 3 years building that Colossus, planning to use it to glass every human border colony within a 12 light-year radius. Voss had traded his life to stop it. The void stretched out behind the ship, dark and empty, no longer thrumming with that hungering, whispering pressure. He didn't feel it watching anymore. For the first time since they'd entered the abandoned Colossus, the silence felt like peace, not a trap. He keyed the jump drive, and the stars stretched into streaks of light as they left the void's edge behind.